North Carolina Republicans filed half a dozen bills last week on transgender young people, limiting their participation in sports and regulating a host of medical procedures. Perhaps not coincidentally, these bills, always controversial, come right as a major party switch gave the Republican legislative majority the numbers they need to pass whatever bills they want over Governor Roy Cooper's vetoes without help from Democrats. Welcome to the Daily Download. I'm Travis Fain, and today's deep dive conversation is about the wave of legislation here in North Carolina and nationally grappling with transgender issues. I'm joined by Brian Murphy, who covers sports and politics here at WRAL, and the two certainly intersect here. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
So there are 6 bills, although I believe 2 of them are actually identical to each other. And the one we'll talk about most says if you're a transgender girl, if your birth certificate says you're male but you identify as female, you can't play girls' sports in a public North Carolina high school. Is that about right?
Yeah, middle school. It would apply to middle school and high school. The bill, as currently written, would also keep girls from playing sports like football and wrestling, of which there's been more and more girls participating in those sports. The bill sponsors tell me when I ask them directly about that is a mistake, and they will try to work to correct that. But yes, the bill and its intention would keep biological males from being able to play girls' sports in North Carolina.
Yeah, and so how often is that actually happening? We always talk about a bill, you're changing the law, so show me the reason you're changing the law. What are they pointing to say this is needed?
Well, by the best estimates that we can get, there's only 15 known instances of a transgender person playing girls' sports in the state. The most high profile of this happened in Hiawassee and Cherokee County, where reportedly a transgender athlete spiked a volleyball and caused some long-term concussion issues for an opposing player. I've seen the video. I've seen some very grainy video. The ball does clearly hit the opposing player in the head. She's not prepared for it. I will take everyone at their word that she's had concussions and long-term lingering issues. I went back and read a lot about this, and if you read local reports, it's unclear if the athlete in question is transgender. If you read some other more inflammatory media, there's no question that she's transgender. If you go back and read the minutes of the Board of Education meeting, they grappled with this. They said, should this team ever play this other team again in the future? It's unclear in those minutes if the player is transgender or not. The player in question is also a 4-year player. They've played against this player for at least 4 years, according to the minutes. And so if it had been a problem, it was not a problem in that time period. Certainly this incident, and everyone feels bad for the girl that was injured, it was sort of a trigger for this bill, I think, in a lot of ways.
And of course, the concern is that boys usually stronger than girls, particularly when they're young like that. And a lot of people think they should not be competing athletically against each other. But again, 15 known transgender high school athletes. That's according to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I believe you did the math. I'm reading from your story. It's less than 1/1000% of the roughly 180,000 student athletes who participated statewide last year. So it's a really, really small number. But these bills, they really ignite the passions. And I mean, some House Bill 2. So House Bill 2 years ago in North Carolina dealt with what kind of bathrooms people were supposed to use, caused this big backlash. There were various boycotts. I mean, are we heading for that kind of culture war argument again? Or nationally has it become so common to have this conversation?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get North Carolina is going to receive any backlash because North Carolina, at least 20 states have already passed some kind of ban on transgender athletes participating. The Biden administration came out and sort of tried to split the baby a little bit on this and said, you can't have blanket bans. You can't say all transgender athletes cannot play, but on a case-by-case basis or on a school-by-school basis or on a team-by-team basis, you can make those decisions. And so, people are really grappling with this. I mean, I think, if you see a 6'4" man playing, high school volleyball against girls, people shake their head a little bit. If you see a 12-year-old who, doesn't really identify as a boy or a girl running middle school cross country, I think most people would say, well, good. Let him or her have that opportunity. I think we saw this. The Supreme Court has even gotten involved in this. There was a runner in West Virginia, a middle school runner. West Virginia tried to bar the athlete from participating, and the Supreme Court said, nope, you have to let the transgender athlete run as the case makes its way through the system. So there are complexities to this, and obviously these bills reduce it to pretty much black or white.
Right, and this is such a difficult, at least I have to imagine, community to be part of because you already feel like you are almost literally in the wrong body and you're grappling with that, and then you stand out further because people tell you, well, you have to do this, you can't do that. We're going to take a little break here. When we come back, we'll talk more about some of the other bills. We'll talk a little bit more about the sports bill, and we'll talk about the politics of all this as the North Carolina General Assembly session rolls on. Stick with us. All right, welcome back to the Daily Download. We're talking about a raft of transgender-related legislation that has been proposed and is probably going to move forward in the North Carolina legislature with Brian Murphy here at WRAL. And the bill we've talked about so far, it deals with sports, like who can play girls' sports. That bill is almost certainly going to pass, or at least we would think. It's got 30 Republicans in it. Every Republican in the Senate sponsored it. The Speaker of the House says it'll probably move forward. That's a real good sign that this legislation is either going to become law or become the subject of a veto fight, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think this bill was introduced 5 years ago, or not 5 years ago, a couple of years ago, and it didn't move. It didn't move at all. This year, it does feel like it's going to move. These issues are moving nationally. Like you said, all 30 senators are on board with this. That's a veto.
All 30 Republican senators.
All 30 Republican senators. That is a veto-proof majority right there.
Right.
So I think we kind of see where this is headed.
How do you determine a student's sex? I mean, you very quickly move into a direction where the logistics of this become troubling.
Yeah, the bill doesn't entirely spell it out. Now, we've seen in other states, including most notably Florida, there's a lot of concern that opponents, parents or coaches on the other team could request some sort of gender check. The bill really hones in on your birth certificate, what your sex was listed on your birth certificate. And that would lead me to believe that you would probably need to carry your birth certificate or a copy of your birth certificate with you if you were playing in sports events. You would think this would run through each team, right? A coach would have to certify that all the players on his team or her team meet the specifications of the law. But what happens if there's a question, if other coaches or parents or officials raise a complaint about a certain player, then it's unclear. And
you would think that would target the best players on the best teams, potentially. I mean,
yeah, I look at, if you look at women's athletics, you look at someone like Brittany Griner, who has faced a lot of questions about her genetic makeup through time, in part because she's dominant.
She's a WNBA player that you might recognize. She was arrested in Russia and held for months and months on time on a fairly minor drug charge. That's Brittany Griner.
Yeah, and she was a college basketball star for a long time, and she dealt with lots of innuendo that she was a man. She was super tall, not with traditionally feminine looks. And so, someone like that, are they going to be questioned every time they go and play a game? Is someone going to ask for their birth certificate? You can really see where this could lead. If you're willing to look at where this might lead, you could probably see where it might lead.
Let's talk a little bit about the numbers. So last week, a representative from Mecklenburg County named Tricia Cotham, a longtime Democrat, she switched parties. She is now a Republican. So the Senate already had the veto-proof majority. The House now has a veto-proof majority. Republicans, if they all stick together, can pass whatever they want, regardless of what Democratic Governor Roy Cooper thinks. But Cotham has campaigned on LGBTQ issues. She said in her 2022 platform, and this is from your story, LGBTQ plus youth are under attack by Republican state legislatures across the country. I will stand strong against discriminatory legislation and work to pass more protections at the state level. But now she's a Republican. Is she going to stick with that? That's the question, right?
Yeah, this is a fascinating question, not just about LGBTQ issues, but about abortion and other issues on which Cotham has made strong Democratic stances, and now has switched parties, and has she switched sides on these issues? I think it's fascinating. And I mean, that is a very specific.
Right.
That there's really no way to parse that and then vote for some of these other bills that have come up. You may try to say, hey, I'm for women's sports, and so I think only girls should be playing women's sports. Okay, we could see that, but you've mentioned there are 6 bills. There are others about gender-affirming care and things like that. That would seem to fit specifically under LGBT youth are under attack by Republican state legislatures, as Cotham said.
And when these bills came out, we asked Cotham, and she was a no comment on them. Of course, she was part of kind of I won't say a media circus, but I mean, she had a lot going on. She was switching parties that week. The Democrats are yelling about her. The Republicans are loving her. All this stuff is going on in her life. She said she had not seen these bills yet, but she certainly did not say, oh, I haven't seen those bills yet, but you know how I feel about LGBTQ issues. So it's something of a question. And the legislature's on spring break this week. So I just feel we are really going to we're not dipping a toe into the culture war waters here. We're kind of diving in, right?
And this is what I thought was fascinating. Up until this point, the legislature has largely avoided those issues during this session. There's been some pistol permitting stuff, some gun stuff, but largely there's been no abortion bill. There hasn't been much
one is coming.
Right, but there hasn't been much in the way of transgender issues. There hasn't. Anyhow, now we're in it. Like all of a sudden, the switch, I don't know if it was the switch, I don't know if it was the Senate deadline for getting bills filed, but all of a sudden we're talking about abortion. We are talking about transgender rights. I mean, the culture issues are now front and center and probably will be until the end of the session.
Yeah, several of these bills don't deal with sports. They deal with what's called gender-affirming care. So you take puberty blockers as a young person. And I should say gender-affirming care for a minor. These don't typically deal with adults, although one of them limits the state health plans, if you're a state employee, what the insurance would and wouldn't pay for. But generally, these deal with minors. Puberty blockers, various hormones. I mean, ultimately surgery, but mostly we're talking about puberty blockers and hormones that people take before they turn 18 to kind of start that transition once they've decided that their gender does not fit their body. I think 13 states have some sort of bill, some sort of law like this, so it's not that uncommon.
Yeah, and the states that you would expect, traditionally Republican states. I also think there's a bill, Senate Bill 641, which basically gives health practitioners kind of the ability to back away from this care. I mean, we've seen some of these bills with abortion and other things. We've seen it with gay marriage, right? If you have an objection to that, you don't have to participate. So one of those bills would allow people in the healthcare profession to sort of back out of issues that they're uncomfortable with. And I think all these taken together, I think, are going to be, very, very controversial. But as you said, Republicans can pass all of these without a single Democratic vote.
Yeah, and there's a lot of medical science here that I guess we're probably not going to get too deeply into. And things have changed quickly on this issue, and people have kind of it makes some people's head spin, and other people say, look, this is a community that needs your protection. I think something like 40% of transgender people attempt suicide because it is such a difficult way to go through life. And so the argument from their side is, why are you making this harder?
We've also seen, studies out of Europe that have been doing some of this gender-affirming care for a while say maybe this isn't the best way to do it. Maybe we should let teens grow older before they make these kind of decisions that are maybe in some cases maybe irreversible.
It's a big decision.
Right. And so I don't know that there's a one side, this does seem to have some nuance to it as far as the science goes. There doesn't seem to be a clear cut, this is the right way to handle this, this is not the right way to handle this.
Do you get the sense that lawmakers who are on these bills, who are supporting these bills, are talking to transgender people or talking to activists, or kind of getting that side of it, as opposed to filing a bill that the Republican base wants that gets people talking, that becomes kind of this flashpoint? I mean, are those conversations happening, best you can tell?
I don't think so. The Equality NC executive director Kendra Johnson told WRAL this week that,
and they're a well-known LGBTQ advocacy group here in North Carolina, Equality NC,
and said, as talking about that sports issue that we talked about, the high school volleyball issue, that it's been grossly misrepresented, and that the folks who are introducing this legislation refuse to sit down with their constituents, presumably their LGBTQ constituents. I think the other important thing is, we're talking about a segment, a very tiny segment of the population. We're talking about maybe 1% of the population, probably less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, less than 1% of the population. Suddenly there's been at least 5 bills filed dealing with less than 1% of the population. And so, I think there's certainly some political aspect to all of this happening. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Murph. And thank you at home for listening. We appreciate you listening to the WRAL Daily Download, making it part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcast or whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email waiting for you in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, headlines, get you ready for your day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter. And thank you for your attention.